pain, neurological symptoms such as persistent headaches or blurred vision, or tiny blood spots under the skin beyond the site of the injection. Now, I'm looking at those. Say had an AstraZeneca jab 7 or 8 days ago and then get, you know, a bad headache.
Yes, it does sound rather non-specific, doesn't it, Evan? I think it's important to recognise that a lot of people who do have these vaccines, they're very potent vaccines and they do have significant side effects, but mostly they settle within 2 or 3 days. It'd be unusual to develop those really significant symptoms after day 4, and it's really only between, say, day 4 and day 8 that these rather unusual symptoms are developing, and it's all within a couple of weeks of the vaccine. So I think the timing is crucial, and it's not just any old mild headache. This is a really persistent headache that just it goes on and on. So that's one of the quite specific.
That is, and leg swelling and chest pain, shortness of breath. I mean, sometimes those things you'd be
yes.
So those worried about anyway.
Those aren't symptoms of this rare clotting of the blood vessels in the brain. Those are more associated with general clots. So one of the things that they did notice was that there were very few people who did get clots in, say, the vein draining the spleen, which is why they listed the abdominal pain I rather did mention. But mostly it's these persistent headaches and neurological symptoms which you need to go and report if you do develop them at that particular time, you know, after 4 days and before 14 days.
Is there anything medics can do for you? You go to A&E with this, and they might do a blood test, find you've got low platelets, and then you tell them you had a vaccine 7 days before, and they might say, okay, this is obviously a risk. Is there much they can do at that point?
Yes, so I think it is important to recognise, because it is potentially treatable, you know, with steroids or with immunoglobulin infusions, and it's also important, you know, to recognise that that this is a very specific syndrome. It's not just ordinary blood clots in the legs that you might get if you're immobile, you know, taking a long flight or you're on the contraceptive pill. This is quite a different and quite distinct syndrome.
And that, it appears to be some sort of immune overreaction, doesn't it, of some kind?
Probably, yes. Although there's still some uncertainty about that. Yes.
Actually, you've just taken me to another question on the list here, which is, should women taking the pill, which often comes with warnings of potential side effects of blood clot, should they be concerned about taking the AstraZeneca vaccine?
Well, as far as the evidence goes so far, I would say no. You know, the clotting problem that people on the oral contraceptive pill get is a very different sort of clotting problem from this rather specific one with the low platelets and the clotting of abnormal veins in places that you wouldn't normally see. So it is a very different syndrome. And we think that the causes of it are probably quite distinct. So we shouldn't really confuse the two.
Right, that's okay. Well, that might also answer the next question on this list, which is, if you have a history of blood clots, if you've had them in the past, or you have them in your family, again, is this something that would change that risk calculation that you might do on the value of the vaccine?
Well, in general terms, again, I would say no, because you know there are different mechanisms that can lead to abnormal blood clotting, and there really is no association between them. I mean, in a rare case where somebody had developed this particular type of clotting after they'd been treated with heparin, for example, then there might possibly be an association. But you know, that would really have to be something that you'd have to sort out with your medical team.
So just to be clear, this is rather like people having an adverse reaction to the blood thinner heparin when the body fights heparin by clotting, and it's kind of this adverse reaction. It seems more similar to that than the usual blood, just a blood clot.
Exactly. Yes, it's a very rare, rather sort of, it sounds rather paradoxical, doesn't it? That you give them a blood thinner, and for some reason it causes this abnormal clotting, and it is, well described, but it's a very, very uncommon thing, just like this adverse effect.
Now, there are millions of us who've had a dose of the AstraZeneca vaccine. One dose of the AstraZeneca vaccine, and over the next few weeks we'll be getting an invitation to get a second dose. I think I know the answer to your question. I think I know the answer to the question I'm putting to you here, Peter. Should I worry about getting a second dose of the AstraZeneca vaccine?
Well, so far all the descriptions are in people who have had the first dose. So as far as we know, it's something which will reveal itself with the first dose, and getting the second dose is not going to be a problem. But I would say at the moment, obviously, that more people have had the first dose than have had the second. So it's possible that something will emerge, but at the moment the advice is very clear that you carry on, you get your second dose, and if you didn't have a problem with the first dose, it's unlikely you're going to get it with the second. And
if I interpreted it right, even if you're under 30, and you may be a health worker, for example, and you've had one AstraZeneca vaccine already, you've now got, you're still advised to get the second one and to get the same one, because they're more confident of having the same vaccine twice than putting you on a mixed dose of different vaccines.
That's right. At the moment, the advice is that you should, if available, take the same vaccine with the second dose, because there really isn't enough evidence what happens when you mix and match. There are clinical studies going on to see what effect that has, and it may be that that's perfectly all right. But at the moment, if the same vaccine is available, you should have that for your second dose.
How are you feeling this afternoon about it all? We're about to talk to Professor Melinda Mills, who's looked at vaccine confidence, but you're not feeling sort of like it's taken a battering, this AstraZeneca vaccine.
No, my feeling is that there's now so much greater clarity than there was just a few days ago. We were all concerned about this. What was it going to look like when all the evidence had been examined in detail? Was there going to be something very alarming? And actually, I think it's quite reassuring that the regulators have picked this up. They've gone through it with a very fine-tooth comb, and they've been able to say categorically what we should do about it in order to, slightly change course, but certainly not suspend the AstraZeneca vaccine, which is such a wonderful vaccine worldwide in terms of being able to tackle this horrific disease.
All right, Peter Openshaw, we do appreciate your time this afternoon, both in the last few minutes and earlier in the programme. And that brings us to Professor Melinda Mills, who's Director of the Leverhulme Centre for Demographic Science at Oxford University, advises the government as part of the SPI-B committee that feeds into SAGE, speaking in a personal capacity. And Melinda, you have thought very hard about vaccine confidence. I wonder how worried you are that when people hear that there are these concerns, that they will just say, I'd rather not take the risk.
Well, definitely people, are understanding and they're hearing all of these things. And you have to think risk is something like dropping a stone into a pond, and it could have this ripple effect, not just on this vaccine, but other ones. And I think it's really difficult for people to, think. We have all these mental strategies, and we're trying to make sense of all of this uncertainty, and we need some sort of anchor. So what we often give people is this numerical predictor, this probabilistic prediction of, it's 1 in 250,000 people that are at risk. But that's actually really hard to understand, and you have to see it in relative terms. So, your risk of, if you go and get into your car, the risk of dying in an accident in the UK is 1.6 per 100,000.
Journeys or people per year?
Sorry, journeys. Right. And then the odds of being struck by lightning is, 1 in 500,000 people. So, so you have to think about these different odds in relation to sort of, relative risks.
People do have funny ways of thinking about small numbers versus big numbers too, don't they? I mean, you might hear about a child stuck in a well, which conveys a very vivid picture and is a dramatic story, and that will be much more important in your mind than hearing about 30,000 children in a faraway place having to dying of malnutrition or something like that. We find it very difficult to weigh up small numbers like these cases we're hearing about versus the 150,000 people who died of COVID, for example.
Yeah, I think we know from that personal experiences or information from your family and friends these narratives can often outweigh any sort of information you could provide people. And I mean, it's really interesting. We have almost the identical thing if we look in the historical literature, what happened in 1976 in the US when they rolled out for swine flu the vaccine for 45 million people. And, they had almost the identical thing, and the director of the Center for Disease Control in the US reflected about it. He said there's 3 lessons. When large numbers of people are exposed to a vaccine, you'll get adverse reactions. So we see this over multiple drugs and vaccines. The second one is age groups respond differently. And the third one is, when we have these different illnesses or deaths, when they occur, everyone will attribute it to the vaccine. So at that time, they had legionnaires. It was unrelated, but everyone attributed it to that. So that communication was really important. So, we see it if you look at these historical cases, it's almost identical what happens.
Yeah, and what you say, ages respond in different ways. I mean, it's interesting, there's almost been more evidence of vaccine hesitancy among the young than the old, but that might just be because, of course, COVID is so much more risky to the old.
Well, yeah, so it was interesting in the press conference today, the risk-benefit calculation. And I think, in terms of individual risk, people have to think about, weighing this up across the ages. And we know that older people know that they are at risk of more severe illness or death. But for younger people as well, you have to think about the societal risks. So, who am I not protecting when I'm not getting vaccinated? But there's also at a regulatory level and the national level, I think we also have to think about the broader risk-benefit calculation. So if they are hesitant, how many people could die if they don't get vaccinated, or if people don't show up for their vaccine appointments, or other people develop long COVID or have mental illness issues. So I think we have to widen up the risk-benefit calculation as well too.
One of the things that makes people, I would think, most suspicious and most scared is when they feel the authorities are hiding something or not being quite forthcoming or trying to sell something. And you can imagine that they would be trying to reassure us, take the vaccine because it's the one we've got most of. I didn't get the impression this afternoon that there was any kind of hiding of the data. I mean, they were pretty upfront, and indeed the news of just how many people have died was I thought, perhaps on the very much higher than I had been expecting. I don't know, is that a known strategy that honesty pays in these situations?
Definitely, full transparency pays in these situations. And I mean, that's always what regulators do. And if you can go on the website, you can find all the numbers, and that's been transparent. I think where people could get confused is that there was first a different reaction in Europe, for example, and in Germany, for example, because they had different levels of incidence. So they were seeing different levels than in the UK population. So when they were looking at the figures, they were different. And now we have the new figures as of March 31st, and it becomes quite clear that there's these strong associations. So transparency is really key. And, and I think, that will take away people's concern as well. If the UK is acting in a very serious manner, just as Europe is, and, across the world looking at this, then people will have more confidence.
Professor Melinda Mills from University of Oxford, thank you so much for talking to us about confidence in the vaccine programme. Now it's 6:15. Let's have a last look at the PM headlines. Mairead Devlin.
It's been recommended that the under 30s in the UK be offered an alternative to the AstraZeneca jab because of possible links with extremely rare blood clots. Both British and European regulators have stressed that the vaccine's benefits far outweigh any risks for most people. And a High Court judge has ruled that the gambling firm Betfred was wrong to deny a customer a 1.7 million jackpot because of a computer glitch.
Thanks, Mairead. Now, the debate over reopening borders and freeing up travel has been framed around holidays, the natural desire of people to get a change, some sun and escape over summer. But unless you might think holidays are something of an indulgence at a time like this, there is another reason people may want to travel internationally: to see family living elsewhere. Now, after our item on holidays yesterday, we heard from a couple of PM listeners overseas who are missing family over here in the UK. In Switzerland, Kate Shepherd, and in France, Sharon Willingham. I caught up with them.
We've lived here for 18 years and all our family is based in the UK.
And when did you last see the UK relatives?
I saw my parents and my in-laws before Christmas, so December 2019.
19, so it has been quite a while. Sharon, what about you? Where are you? What are your circumstances?
We're in the Lot-et-Garonne, a little town called Tournon-d'Agenais in southwest France. We've been here for nearly 6 years. We have 4 children, 8 grandchildren scattered across the UK. And I was last in the UK February last year for my 60th birthday. And it was supposed to be a family meal with a year of celebration to come. But unfortunately, as we got back to France early March, straight into lockdown pretty much. And that was it. Fortunately, all the children and grandchildren managed to get over in the summer as soon as the restrictions were removed beginning of July. I think they all came over one after another and managed to, yeah. So it was pretty full on for several weeks, but at least we managed to get to see them all.
Have either of you had in your families, and there have been many cases of this, of course, of births or deaths over the last year that you have missed being distant?
Yes, I have had 3 deaths and 2 babies being born. We've seen them on online, which has been lovely. But yes, that's been probably the hardest part, is particularly for the deaths, not being able to get back.
Mm. Of course, Sharon, Kate, you can see people online. It's so much more easily than we really can imagine. We've dusted off the Zooms and the Skypes, and then so you are presumably very much in touch, are you, Kate?
Yes, we did go through particularly the first lockdown with lots of family Zoom quizzing, which was brilliant. And so we've been able to do that. And with the grandparents, it's been really important to be able to speak to them and for the boys to see their grandparents wherever possible, because we're just not quite sure when we will be able to see them next.
Sharon?
Yes, we've obviously, thanks to FaceTime and all the other technology, I speak to them all on a regular basis, and they're very good at phoning, FaceTiming, keeping in touch with us. My sisters and I, we lost our parents within 6 months of each other, end of 2018, early 2019, not COVID related, but we did feel that 2020 we would have normally got together at times to remember their passing and things like that, and their birthdays, which in the past, like Kate, I've been able to do, frequently, back from Bergerac into Liverpool every couple of months or so. So it became the norm to see family on a regular basis. And I think my sisters and I, we felt that very much this year, that we miss seeing each other on those occasions.
You can't at the moment, but there have been periods where you've been able to come and travel with the cost of having to quarantine when you get into the UK and maybe spend 10 days locked in. Has that not worked? Does that not work for either of you as a kind of, it's obviously it's not ideal, but you can visit, Kate?
It's certainly something that we've considered, but the idea of spending 10 days with my 2 sons in a room is not something that I think would be any good for anybody's well-being, really. And it is very expensive to do that. So you keep thinking, oh, well, it'll just be another few months. Or maybe we can go at Christmas. Maybe we can go at Easter. And it just keeps being put off until, well, hopefully, when we get vaccinated, we keep our fingers crossed that Switzerland is in a green zone, and then we might be able to come this summer.
I have a heart condition, so I was reluctant to travel until vaccinated. My husband is a bit older, and he was also worried about being in the age category of being vulnerable. So fortunately, we've now both had our first and our second vaccinations are due the end of this month.
Okay.
So, yeah, so we've done quite well for France, really.
What your feeling is then, Sharon?
I just think that obviously social media gets going and people get on the bandwagon. Why do people have to fly away to the sun and it's only people with money who can afford to do that? Well, that's not really strictly true. You know, they come here, we're fortunate enough to have a big home to accommodate them, and they have a holiday with us. And for some of them, it would be a holiday they couldn't afford.
Yeah, it's something. We haven't been vaccinated here yet, and one of my sons is in a vulnerable position as well. So we would be very careful, I think. I can't imagine being able to have two rules for some people who are friends and family, you know, UK nationals going back into the UK. I think we probably all just have to suck it up, really, and just get through it. But it is quite frustrating when you see people moaning about not being able to go to Dubai or somewhere, and when you just want to get back and see your family and friends.
PM listeners overseas, the overseas branch, Kate Shepherd and Sharon Willingham, reminding us that it's not just indulgent holidays that people are missing travel for. Now, we've talked a lot on the programme about vaccine passports. We now know they're going to be trialled at big events in the next few months. The World Snooker Championships at the Crucible in Sheffield is one of the earmarked events. It starts in 10 days' time. How is it going to work? Jason Ferguson is the chair of the governing body, the World Professional Billiards and Snooker Association. Jason, thank you so much for joining us. Are you ready for this? How are you going to make it work?
Well, of course, it's a pleasure. And yeah, we're obviously delighted to be selected as one of the events for, event research by the government. So obviously delighted to be in that position. And in that position, having run over 20 successful events during this COVID period. So we have been running a lot of events behind closed doors. We did have a pilot event last year. It was fairly short-lived. Things got shut down again. But actually, this year we are much better prepared for it. And obviously we're working very closely with the government, their advisors, medical teams, DCMS and everyone else in that mix. So very excited about it actually after a year of delivering live sport to the world from behind closed doors. It's a very successful event, this one.
What's the capacity of the Crucible?
It's just under 1,000 seats at full capacity, so it's not a big arena like you would see in many sporting events. And our sport tends to work in those arenas around 1,000 to 2,500 seats.
But you'll take how many for the?
The plan is to start out at a socially distanced capacity. So, I mean, in the first round, 17th to the 21st of April, we're looking at a 33% capacity, so a little over 320 seats. Now, bearing in mind that we're going to our existing ticket holders, they come first. They've obviously had tickets booked, ordered, and so on. They will get to choose, and then after that, we will be looking to open up and put tickets on sale. The plan is to step up. We are looking to move forward into a 50% capacity for round 2. Now that would mean slightly over what would be normally socially distanced. So that would include, of course, some group bookings in order to group people together and so on. So that would be 22nd to the 26th of April. And then there is a plan to actually increase that as time goes on. Now, of course, we will be monitored, we'll be under government protocols, we'll be under local health and safety. Everybody will be monitoring this. And the idea is to go up to 75% for quarterfinals and semi-finals, and then possibly even up to maximum capacity for the final, which is played over 2 days, Sunday the 2nd and the 3rd of May, which is the bank.
Early May. Now look, Jason, talk me through the customer experience. What am I, if I am one of your regulars, so I've got a ticket, I'm coming in a couple of weeks, what am I going to show? What do I have to do? Or are you going to offer tests, lateral flow tests at the door in a big sort of holding pen outside?
Well, first of all, we do know that it is going to involve a lot of testing. We're not just in the, putting people into an arena with nothing in place. There will be a lot of mitigating procedures in place. Testing is one of them. Customers will need to have a COVID test that will be either the day before or on the day of the match that they are going to watch.
A lateral flow test?
Well, at the moment, we are saying, yes, there will be that facility, but again, we are working on a day-to-day basis leading up to the event with the government, so things can change.
Okay, so you're making me obviously go wrong. No, I'm joking, but it's still work in progress, all the details.
Of course, we are honing our skills and making sure that everything is tight. Now, again, we won't be making these decisions. We are under the controls of the government. They will put those processes upon on us, and we will deliver the event to those processors.
But if I am fully vaccinated, I've had 2 vaccinations, you know, more than a week or 2 behind me. Can I show you the little card that you get when you get vaccinated as proof of that?
At this moment in time, we are saying that every single person needs to be tested on a building. Now, that I have to say, you know, we've been running the World Snooker Tour and delivering that to the world all season. We have been running a vigorous testing program in and out of all of our events with our staff, our rigging teams, our TV crews, everybody on site. And it has been successful and run very tight. We've got a fantastic team. Credit to the team who's working on the ground. And you know, from that, we've actually got to this position where we believe we can do it on a match bet.
You've got it. So it's all about the testing. Jason Ferguson, good luck with the World Snooker Championships in Sheffield.
Political thinking on BBC Radio 4. The only time that anyone has ever called me Black Boris was when I was selected. A series of conversations with people who shape our lives, about them rather than about the news.
The norm for me growing up were early morning raids, British Army coming into my home.
I think people in public life are often frustrated that they only show a 2-dimensional side to themselves. They often relish the chance to show who they really are.
You know, Nick, there are a lot of my colleagues that think this constituency is totally wasted on me.
Political Thinking with me, Pete Robinson, continues on Saturday afternoon at 5:30 on Radio 4 and BBC Sounds.
Now, time for some weather. Nick Miller can tell us how it is going to play out.
Well, I've been turning a little less cold for the next couple of days before the Arctic air comes back at the weekend. With the less cold air, the wind is turning westerly, the Atlantic air now coming in, bringing more cloud, and this evening some rain to Northern Ireland, overnight pushing into western Scotland, parts of Wales and the western side of England. Elsewhere you can still see a touch of frost, but nowhere near as cold as it was last night. Now, tomorrow for southwest England, for Wales, the Midlands and across northern England, a couple of zones of thicker cloud moving through, taking some patchy rain, no more. Of cloud, a few brighter breaks at times. In Northern Ireland, plenty of clouds, some patchy rain. You can expect some heavier rain spreading south late afternoon and into the evening. And for Scotland, there'll be a band of rain spreading southwards during the day, behind which it may brighten up in northern Scotland, but feel colder by then with a few wintry showers coming back. Now, temperatures across the UK tomorrow mainly in the range of 8 to 11 degrees Celsius. So yes, a little bit higher, but the westerly winds will strengthen, especially in northern Scotland.
All right, Nick, thank you for that. 8 will be a good deal warmer than it was this morning. That's PM for today. Our studio director was Graham White and our editor, Fiona Leach. Have a lovely evening.
BBC News at 6 o'clock. This is Jane Steele. Good evening. People under 30 in the UK are to be offered alternatives to the AstraZeneca vaccine after regulators here and in the EU identified a potential link to rare blood clots. Officials say the benefits still outweigh the risks, but the question is more finely balanced for younger age groups. The government says its vaccine colleges in England where cases of sexual abuse have been reported by students. A gambler who was denied a £1.7 million jackpot because of a software glitch has won his court battle to get his winnings. The World Snooker Championship is to be played in front of the first capacity crowd at a British sporting event for more than a year. People under the age of 30 in Britain will now be offered an alternative to the AstraZeneca coronavirus vaccine due to mounting evidence linking the jab to rare blood clots. Following a safety review, the UK medicines regulator said 19 people were now known to have died after developing a clot following their first dose of the vaccine. The MHRA said the benefits of the jab still outweighed the risks for the vast majority of people, but it had decided to change its advice for the youngest adults out of the utmost caution. The European Medicines Agency has also concluded that unusual blood clots should be listed as a very rare side effect of the AstraZeneca vaccine. EU health ministers are meeting now to consider their response. Our first report this evening is from our health correspondent, Emmy Grimley.
The MHRA said the evidence of a link between the AstraZeneca vaccine and these rare blood clots on the brain was firming up, though it said it had not been proved beyond doubt and extensive work was still needed. Out of 20 million AstraZeneca doses administered in the UK, 79 people had developed serious clots up to the end of March. Nearly 2 affected.
مصباح نتفرج فيك.
Outweighed the risks. Nevertheless, considerations have to be taken into account.
عندي واحد سميك ولا نتفرج فيك.
But it is balanced for the younger people.
واحد سميك ولا نتفرج فيك.
والله مشتك هذا وين طلع؟
على بالي أنا كنت ساكت.
هذا الميكرو الجزائري هذا.
حراشي.
واش
كاين بالو اليوم رافع؟
ما كاين والو اليوم العشية.
البارح كانت ميتة على فيها ما شاء
على بالي راحوا قاعد يشوفوا الماتش البارح.
Their first dose of the AstraZeneca vaccine should still get their second dose.
لا بأس.
Jab. That's the outlook for the UK's vaccine. The Deputy Chief Medical Officer, Jonathan Van Tam, didn't think this would knock that off course.
Because of our supply situation in relation to alternative vaccines, the effect on the timing of our overall programme should be zero or negligible. Of course, this contingent upon getting the supplies that we
قلت لك لا باس مال.
لا باس كاش خدمة ولا والو؟
والله والو باستون شيخ هذا ما كان بنادم يشل العقل وشوية الخلايا يمشيهم.
ولا نهار كامل نشوفك الله يبارك تخدم تقول لي ما كاينش خدمة. أنا قلت كاش لا نبوس ندوي
على رمضان شيخ قلت نسبها نكمل كاع الدار.
والله مليح ما شاء الله.
لو 26 تكون صايم تكون خدام فهمت شويه ثقيله.
كاينه.
وانا بنادم يدرب شويه ما يتكلش غير على تبون.
ويلي يا ودي لاباس عليه.
على نص ساعه ان شاء الله نشعلوا لايف شيخ.
ان شاء الله ان شاء الله.
ان شاء الله نسمعوا الاحوال تاع الحي.
واحنا كارثه ونحصلوها في تبون خويا حسن.
وقتك من تبون خلوه ترونكيل.
والله بارك الله فيك نخدموا. انا قلت لهم كاين 10 كيما حسافين يدير كاين اللي يدير لاس فيغاس. كاين لاس فيغاس اللي يدير.
بالك تقول هكا ولا يبعثوا لي ذباب. ان شاء الله ان شاء الله شيخ.
نحاكمين الحيوط ونكريتيكو برك.
واش انا نديرو مازال ما درنا والو يا ترى ريحوا مع الحيوط.
والله يا سيدي صح شفت كيفاش.
والله يا شيخ واش دير وتقول مازال ما بديتش مازال ما ديماريتش. ومن بعد كيما قلت لي تكا على الحيوط يتكا على الحيوط يحكي كلش.
حاكمك الحيط وداير قارو ويكريتيكي غير السلبيات غير الكريتيك.
نعم رانا عشنا معاهم شيخ. رانا عشنا معاهم.
الله قال نخدموا نفتحوا خلد انا وياك هنايا.
هذه منيحه والله يا شابه. والله ما
كان
يخلونا. شيخ سماتي مع التلميذ تاعو، والله ما يخلونا.
على بالي والله ما يخلوك صح.
ايه
إذا ما خلوكش بالهدا يضربك بعيد.
يا اخو توجور ادعي.
أي تكوبا. وي صح، الدعاء المحصنات صح. ومصطفى وراه راقد ولا؟
كان يهدر معايا مقبل شويه، واحد ساعه هكذا هدر معايا وراح.
اي والله.
يخدم على الشر ان
انا
شاء الله.
حاسه
لا
خلي.
لا لا.
لاباس الله يبارك.
نعم
الله يبارك صح.
مصطفى يا
عندكم ولا صحيح؟
والله غير الحال بارد بزاف صح. سميشه صح، بارده تاع الصح.
لا كلاس عندكم لا كلاس
ما
تما.
تقدرش تريح بالتريكو هنا ديميمون، شي امبوسيبل.
لا كلاس عندكم تما.
بارده. صب ثلج في الجبال.
يهبط البرد كاع يهبط لتحت.
ما مسميشه بصح حنا دايرين علينا بزاف الجبال هنايا.
اي والله صح كاين. على حسب خليك تخدم هكذا.
واحد نص ساعه ان شاء الله الشيخ صح.
ربي يعاونك. شكرا. السلام عليكم.
شكرا شيخ، الله يسترك.
Gap in our current understanding of physics. An experiment has found that subatomic particles are not behaving in the way expected by the existing theory. The Science and Technology Facilities Council, which has funded the UK's role in the study, said the researchers were on the precipice of a new era of physics. Our science correspondent Pal Ghosh explains.
40 years ago, the current theory of subatomic physics seemed to be on the cusp of explaining the fundamental behaviour of everything in the world around us. Since then, though, astronomers began noticing things in space that couldn't be explained by that theory, which is called the Standard Model. It couldn't give a reason for why faraway galaxies were spinning faster than they should, nor could it explain why the stars and planets and everything on them, including us, exist at all. Now, scientists have found what they describe as strong evidence for a new force of nature and a new particle that might help to solve some of these mysteries. Professor Ben Alanak from Cambridge University says this could be a big moment in the history of physics.
I've been looking all my career for new forces and new particles beyond what we know already, and this is it. This is the moment that I've been waiting for, and I'm not getting a lot of sleep because I'm too excited.
Professor Alanak's excitement stems from results from Fermilab, a particle accelerator just outside Chicago. Researchers there found that particles called muons were not behaving in ways that could be explained by the current theory. In their experiment, the researchers found that muons were wobbling in a magnetic field faster than they should. They believed that a new force could be behind this. And this isn't the only result pointing to a new force. Evidence for it has been growing in results from other particle accelerators in the US, Japan, and most recently from the Large Hadron Collider just outside Geneva. Dr. Mitesh Patel from Imperial College was among those who came up with the LHC's findings.
The race is really on now to try and get one of these experiments to really get the proof that this really is something new. They will take more data and make more measurements and hopefully show evidence that these effects are real.
These very early results aren't definitive yet, but if confirmed, it would lead to a new era of discovery and a deeper understanding of our universe.
Ofsted is to visit schools and colleges in England where allegations of sexual assault have been made by students. The regulator has announced the details of what it will consider as part of a review, which was announced by the government last week after thousands of anonymous claims were posted online. Ofsted's Chief Inspector Amanda Spielman said it was clear many girls didn't feel able to report incidents to their schools. Here's our Education Editor, Baron Jeffries.
Over recent weeks, the testimony of girls published online has raised further questions about the scale of sexual abuse involving pupils on and off school premises. This review by Ofsted will look at the range and severity of allegations, what stops children reporting, and whether victims receive the right support. A sample of state and independent schools where cases have been raised will be visited, with inspectors speaking to pupils as well as staff. Ofsted says it will question its own approach and whether the separate inspectorate for independent schools has been robust enough. All of this comes 5 years after MPs warned that the sexual abuse and harassment of girls had become part of daily life and called for urgent action. Government guidelines were subsequently updated to include more detailed advice on sexual assaults by one child on another. A new curriculum covering relationships and sex education was due to be taught from this academic year in England, but schools have been allowed to delay its introduction due to the pandemic.
A man has won his 3-year legal battle against the bookmaker Betfred, which refused to pay out a £1.7 million jackpot. Andy Green will finally receive his winnings after the High Court ruled in his favour. Our Home Affairs correspondent Tom Simons has been following the case.
Andy Green clocked up a series of wins on the Frankie Dettori Magic 7 blackjack game when he hit the jackpot, £1.7 million. But Betfred said he couldn't have it. A software fault had resulted in him getting too many trophy cards, which ramped up his winnings. In a further gamble, Andy Green took Betfred to court and today hit the legal jackpot. A judge ruled that the contract covering the game and preventing wins when there are faults was not transparent or fair. Mr. Green said at one point he wished he'd never won the money because the legal route made his life a misery. He even put up thousands of his own savings to back the court case. Now his life has been transformed.
I look at myself today and all the way through this as a small fish in a big pond fighting a shark. But today proves that little fish is taking a big bite out of that shark.
Betfred will now pay him around £2 million, covering his winnings, costs and interest. It's a ruling which could have wide implications for gambling companies, which may have to make their terms and conditions much clearer. In the last 2 years, there have been 376 faults with online games reported to the Gambling Commission.
You're listening to the 6 o'clock news on BBC Radio 4. The main news so far. Under 30s in the UK are to be offered an alternative COVID vaccine to the AstraZeneca jab due to the evidence linking it to rare blood clots. The Prime Minister has said he sees no reason to deviate from the roadmap for easing lockdown, saying vaccines are safe. Researchers say they found strong evidence of a new force of nature which could revolutionise our understanding of the laws of physics. Still to come, 3 presidents but only 2 chairs causes a diplomatic kerfuffle for the EU and Turkey. 4 people have been arrested in Buckinghamshire following a tense treetop standoff in high winds between protesters and contractors working for HS2. Demonstrators opposed the expansion of the controversial high-speed rail line through ancient woods that is said to have inspired Ron Brown to write Fantastic Mr. Fox. From there, our environment correspondent Claire Marshall reports. The author Roald Dahl, a great walker, is thought to have been inspired by the ancient beech trees of Jones Hill Wood to write his story about a wily fox who outwitted the farmers Boggis, Bunce and Bean. Now chainsaws and diggers can be heard as the felling of part of the wood in the Chilterns area of outstanding natural beauty begins. It is in the way of the controversial HS2 high-speed line from London to Birmingham.
The real-life Bunce family still farm here. HS2 acquired a portion of Peter Bunce's land by compulsory purchase.
Heartbroken. You just don't know where to go next. There's no positive end to anything. Partly history, partly you can't plan. You just don't know how to plan for the next 6 months.
The work had been delayed after roosting bats were found. However, last week Natural England issued licences for the work to go ahead, saying it would not have a detrimental effect on the overall bat population. HS2 says that a new habitat will be created next to the wood, and that it's planting more than 7 million trees along phase 1 of the line. The cost of completing HS2 is now expected to be more than £100 billion, almost 3 times the original estimate. A man who murdered a woman on a night out in Exeter and then dismembered her body has been jailed for life. The judge at the city's Crown Court said Hacene, who's 24, would serve at least 20 years in prison for killing Lorraine Cox in September last year. John Cade reports.
Mr. Justice Garnham described Lorraine Cox as a bright, vivacious, intelligent young woman. He said the way in which Hacene had murdered the 32-year-old, then dismembered her body and disposed of her remains in city centre bins was cowardly and designed to frustrate the course of justice. Mangori had told his trial that Miss Cox had died accidentally after taking drugs, and he claimed that he panicked because as a failed asylum seeker, he feared he could then be deported to Iraq. But the judge said he was struck by a video posted online by Mangori just hours after the murder, in which he said the 24-year-old had appeared remarkably calm as he vaped and listened to music. Mangori had also sent fake social media messages to Lorraine Cox's family, pretending she was still alive. Outside court, Pippa Moore described the loss of her friend.
She guided me, she helped, we confided in each other. Never had that ever before in my life. She would always make you laugh. If there was no party there, she was the party.
In a victim impact statement read to the court, Lorraine Cox's partner, Elise Fallow, said, "My heart is broken, never to be repaired."
Official figures suggest the number of people reporting feelings of loneliness has risen by more than 1 million during the pandemic. The Office for National Statistics said the problem was more prevalent in places with a high concentration of young people or high levels of unemployment. Harry Farley has more details.
These figures suggest that between October and February, more than 7% of adults in Britain felt lonely often or always. And unlike with COVID-19 itself, where the elderly are most vulnerable, it is the young who are the primary victims of isolation. Researchers say living on your own, difficulties with relationships caused by the pandemic, and not having anyone to talk to have also contributed to experiences of loneliness. A year of social distancing and limits on travel has only exacerbated the problem, as Anne-Marie Carr explains.
My mood has been low, very low. I've always been surrounded by people, very busy, and then to spend 12 months without human contact has just been hard, very hard.
The data from the ONS examines levels of loneliness by local authority and suggests they are higher in urban areas than rural villages. This is particularly true where there are declining industries and higher rates of unemployment and crime. Among the places with high levels of reported loneliness were Blackburn, Middlesbrough and Hartlepool, and those with low levels included the Derbyshire Dales and parts of rural Lancashire and Surrey.
University leaders are calling on the Prime Minister to give urgent clarity about when all undergraduates in England will be able to return to campus. Universities UK, which represents Vice-Chancellors, has written to Boris Johnson to highlight that while gyms, spas and zoos can reopen on Monday, 1 million students are still unable to attend classes in person. The Department for Education said it would announce timings by the end of the Easter holidays, but the President of Universities UK, Julia Buckingham, told The World at One that students needed to plan for what could be a very stressful time of year.
All of us who've been to university and all of us who've got family at university understand only too well how important the exams are this term. These exams are looming very close. Finals for our final year students, which will influence their future careers, and for our first and second year students, the exams that they will have to pass to progress into the next year of their course.
The
It's understood that the legal cost of changing your gender will be cut to less than £10 from next month. In September, ministers pledged to reduce the fee, which is currently £140, to apply for a gender recognition certificate. The existing process, which requires 2 medical reports, has been criticised as costly and bureaucratic. The European Commission has condemned an apparently sexist snub to its president, Ursula von der Leyen, on her visit to Turkey yesterday. She was left to sit on a sofa while her male European Council counterpart, Charles Michel, and President Erdogan sat on formal chairs at the head of the room. Reporting from Brussels, here's our correspondent Kevin Connolly.
The European Union's relationship with Turkey has always been awkward and sometimes ill-tempered, but the difficulties don't normally extend to the seating arrangements. When Ursula von der Leyen and Charles Michel turned up together for their photo call with Recep Tayyip Erdogan, they found only a single seat beside him. Mr. Michel, without comment or discussion, promptly occupied it, leaving Ms. von der Leyen awkwardly off to the side. In the past, when the presidents of the European Commission and Council have visited Turkey, both were men and both were provided with seats. Perhaps coincidentally, the EU leaders were raising with Mr. Erdogan the recent Turkish decision to withdraw from the Istanbul Convention on Violence Against Women. A Commission spokesman, Eric Mamer, said the diplomatic tension had influenced the discussion.
The president definitely sees the opportunity to insist on the issues related to women's rights in general and to the Istanbul Convention in particular. It would have been discussed certainly in any case, but obviously this sharpened her focus.
The EU's language towards Turkey is always careful. It seeks to balance the need to remonstrate with Ankara on issues of human rights, whilst also paying Turkey to house millions of refugees who would otherwise make their way to Europe. This issue of protocol, widely noted on Twitter, is food for thought for the Commission, an institution always sensitive about its right to a seat at the high table of world politics, alongside its own member states and their partners.
King Abdullah of Jordan has said that a crisis sparked by an alleged plot involving his half-brother, the former Crown Prince Hamza, has been brought under control. In an address to the nation, the king said sedition had been nipped in the bud and that the whole affair had been painful. Prince Hamza had been accused of conspiring to destabilise the country, which he denied. Plaid Cymru has launched its manifesto for next month's Senedd elections. It promises a referendum on Welsh independence by 2026 if Plaid forms the next government in Cardiff Bay. Our Wales correspondent Thomas Morgan reports.
Independence is an idea so firmly entrenched in Plaid Cymru's core philosophy that it perhaps doesn't come as a surprise that the party's headline-grabbing manifesto promise to voters in Wales is a referendum within 5 years if it came to power. The party leader Adam Price is hedging his bets firmly on the hopes that he can persuade the indie-curious voters in Wales, those willing to entertain the idea of leaving the union, to take the plunge. He says it is economically viable, something that's a constant criticism by indie skeptics.
We believe independence to be the only sure and sustainable means for achieving social and economic progress and for tackling the climate emergency. So a Plaid Cymru government will empower the people of Wales to decide the future of our nation in an independence referendum.
Plaid's manifesto is self-billed as the most radical programme in any Welsh election since 1945. Other promises include plans to create 60,000 green jobs, extending free school meals and making social care free at the point of need. Economist Cost Checking called the ideas achievable, but could not say if the spending was adequate to achieve the desired results. An outright majority of Plaid Cymru made a sixth seems unlikely, considering they achieved less than half of Labour's seats back in the 2016 vote. But at a time of such political uncertainty, Mr. Price will hope that being radical swings the ballot in his favour.
In the city, the 100 share index ended the day up 62 points at 6,885. On Wall Street a short time ago, the Dow Jones was down 15 points at 33,414. On the currency markets, the pound is down 0.9% against the dollar at $1.37.4.
Against the euro, sterling is down 4/5 cent at €1.15.6, making a euro worth 86.5 pence. The final of snooker's World Championships at the Crucible Theatre in Sheffield is to be played in front of a capacity crowd. Organisers say a host of safety precautions will be taken to ensure the event is COVID secure. Our sports correspondent Andy Swiss has been looking at the details.
Last year, the celebrations were decidedly muted. Only 300 people were allowed to watch the World Snooker Final.
6 world titles for Ronnie O'Sullivan.
This year is set to be very different, with the venue at 33% capacity for the first round matches, 75% for the quarter and semi-finals, and then a full crowd of nearly 1,000 people for the final. That would be the first capacity crowd at a British sporting event for more than a year. And the former world champion Shaun Murphy says it's a tantalising prospect.
Throughout the event, the crowds are going to build, and you might get to the final and have a full crowd. I mean, that's just... It's mad that we're even having this conversation, but given that we are, how exciting to think that could happen.
Spectators will have to take a COVID test before they arrive and another 5 days afterwards. They'll also have to wear face coverings, but organisers say social distancing will not be expected in the latter stages. Football is also piloting the return of fans this month at an FA Cup semi-final and the League Cup final, but with limited numbers. The Scottish Government, meanwhile, has given the go-ahead for 12,000 fans to attend Euro 2020 matches at Hampden Park this summer, around a quarter of the stadium capacity.
Much has been said about the dangers of social media, especially for children, but for one boy in the US, the video app TikTok proved something of a lifesaver after a quad bike accident in the woods near his home. Reagan Morris reports from Los Angeles.
12-year-old Trent Jarrett was riding his quad bike through the woods of West Virginia when he crashed. He was alone in the woods, trapped under a heavy machine, but he knew he had an audience watching his live stream on TikTok. Maybe some of them were still listening and could hear his cries for help. 13-year-old Caden Cotnoir was listening from more than 800 miles away in New Hampshire. He told his local news channel that he was watching the TikTok live stream when he saw the crash.
All of a sudden, his phone goes kind of blank. You can see a little bit of light, but brown, leaves. Then you can just hear him, yelling and kind of just yelling for help. It was pretty, sad to hear. He's scared that he's not going to make it out.
When Trent shouted out a phone number, Caden wrote it down and called to get help. The phone number belonged to Trent's grandparents. The family went searching for him and discovered him within about 20 minutes. They were able to lift the heavy quad bike off of the boy, and he only suffered minor cuts and bruises. Caden had followed Trent on TikTok because of the boy's shared interests, including hunting and fishing. They talked together on Zoom after the crash, and Trent thanked his new friend. They both said they hope to meet someday in real life.
The headlines again. People under 30 across the UK are to be offered alternatives to the AstraZeneca coronavirus vaccine because of concerns over a possible link to an extremely rare type of blood clot. UK and European medicines regulators concluded that the benefits far outweigh the risks, and the government says the vaccine rollout remains on track. Scientists say they found strong evidence for the existence of a new force of nature, which they believe challenges the current theories of physics. Ofsted is to inspect schools and colleges in England where students have made allegations of sexual abuse. A High Court judge has ruled that the gambling firm Betfred was wrong to deny a customer a £1.7 million jackpot, which it blamed on a computer glitch. BBC News.
With Jane Steele. There's a date night beckoning in our 6:30 comedy shortly. He's a widower and part-time therapist, looking to put his life back together. She's a shy school teacher with a nervous disposition. They also happen to be neighbours, which could prove awkward if the night doesn't go as planned. Angus Deaton stars after this.
BBC Sounds.
Are serial killers intelligent? Is it okay to kill a brutal dictator? When is deliberately spreading infectious diseases a crime? I'm criminal psychologist Dr. Julia Shaw.
And I'm Sophie Hagen, stand-up comedian. This is a podcast about the worst kinds of people that I've spent my career trying to understand.
You get fascinating crimes and science and disagreements
to figure out the answer to one main question. Why do people do bad things? Bad People. Listen on the BBC Sounds app.
Down on BBC Radio 4, the first in a new series of Alone, where there's excitement and relief amongst the neighbours as the day of Mitch and Ellie's date has arrived.
Alone by Murray Hunter. Episode 1. Remember the date.
Mona Lisa, come here.
Just wanted to...
Okay. That's it. My day done. نستعفف شوية نكسر مع الجماعة شوية. اوكي غدوة ان شاء الله نكملوا الخدمة. غدوة صبيغة هناك خدمة نوجدوا رمضان ان شاء الله. ان شاء الله يكون بخير هذا العام، خير من العام اللي فات كاع. صبغنا مصطفى. السلام عليكم شيخ سمعتي. السلام عليكم. انا باك نشوفو واش نصبغو غدوة. بقات لي خدمة تاع يومين 3 ايام، 1 جور 2 جور 3 جور 3 جور ان شاء الله. هذيك هي من الجمعة نكملهم نوجدو رمضان ان شاء الله. راهو جاي ان شاء الله يكون بخير. غدوة نطاكي هذه الجهة وين كاين السلوم حتى للطرف حتى لهيه هذيك ان شاء الله. لحيانا ربي. حتى هنايا حتى الطرف لهيه هذيك حتى لهيه حتى وين كاين الصول الابيض لهيه هذه كومبلي حتى لهيه. الحالة بارد اليوم، تلج صب في كاش بلاصة ربي يعلم وين، فوقها في الجبال. غدوة ان شاء الله طلس ميشان نزيدو نطاكاو صبيغة. هذيك هي وجدو روحنا نقصرو مع جماعة تمتم دويشة قهوة حليب ونتوكل على ربي. It's me لانزا. لانزا It's me. دويشة تاع 10 مينوت. لانزا نسيت عجينة تاعيا بسيش تاعيا. Hello. Look your bed. You like that? She's هذيك الوصفة تاع القراية هنا من نقرا نقصرو مع الجماعة شوية إن شاء الله. نديرو الشوفاج باردة هنا. كول. Manza, come here.